Good morning. It is Thursday, the 27th of November. I'm Méabh Mc Mahon, and this is Europe Today, Euronews' daily live fix of European news and analysis. Coming up today, speaking in Strasbourg, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has welcomed the latest Ukraine peace deal on the table. She called it a starting point after days of diplomacy. EU foreign affairs ministers also met yesterday to pile pressure on the Kremlin to opt for a more credible commitment to peace. For more, we can cross straight over to Strasbourg, where Euronews' EU editor, Maria Tadeo, is standing by for us this morning. Maria, great to have you with us on this very busy day, of course, in Strasbourg, where MEPs are voting on a resolution in support of Ukraine. But apart from words, what can the Europeans actually do?
Well, yes, Maeve, and also remember today's Thursday was the deadline that Trump put forward for this take it or leave it offer for a peace deal for Ukraine. That deadline obviously is not going to happen. It's now come and gone. Well, when you look at Strasbourg and the European Parliament, yesterday we had a speech from Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the Commission. Much tougher language yesterday, repeating Russia is not ready for peace. The playbook has not changed. This is a country that unless you are strong and you're able to deter will always come back for more. Let's take a look.
The noises from the Kremlin in the last few days say a lot about its real intentions. For them, Ukraine remains a first step in a much bigger game. For Russia, any peace deal is about permanently redrawing maps. It is about returning to great power relations and spheres of influence.
That was, of course, Ursula von
And that was Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission. Of course, in the speech, Maeve repeating that Ukraine is just or could be just the first step for Russia. The Russians want a return of great power politics and power blocs. Now, the Commission also saying on different terms that they want to see the European Union have a bigger say at the table. The head of the Commission repeating those conditions. Anything related to the EU will have to be negotiated by the EU. We need to be at that table. Also repeating the borders cannot be changed by force. Interestingly, Ursula von der Leyen repeated that the Ukrainian army is a decision from the Ukrainians. Russia cannot impose a limit. So this is much tougher language from the head of the Commission. Obviously, the question now is, if the ideas are so clear, the plan is so clear, why did the Europeans not put this forward a week ago when they were caught completely off guard by this 28-point plan negotiated by the Russians and the United States, which we know now is in full negotiation, and the Europeans argue can still be improved further?
That is indeed a very good question. But what about the Russian frozen assets, Maria? The 140 billion euros that's blocked here in Belgium. Are we any closer to a resolution?
Well, and that is really a flashpoint. It was yesterday in Strasbourg. It was something that I really, you could really feel and detect this growing frustration now when it comes to the Belgians, almost exasperation. A European official told me this is our tool. It's our power tool. Our leverage are the frozen assets, and we need to make this reparations loan for Ukraine happen before the end of December, because you could be in a situation where the U.S. could already push a deal. You could be in a situation where they decide to split up the frozen assets, give some money to Russia. That was in the initial proposal that the Americans presented a week ago. So that is a pressing issue for the Europeans. There is pressure on the Belgians. Yesterday, growing exasperation. I understand, based on a diplomat, that the Commission will put forward more legal options today to try to calm the nerves, but they want to see the Belgians move quickly. Now, on this point, Maeve, if I may, I am happy to say we are joined to debrief by Rio Terrace. He is an MEP and General. Sir, just to start off with, the frozen assets. Why is this not moving? Does it need to move?
Of course it does. We are already too late. We are years too late. We need to very quickly start to get us together and find the finances. We don't tell me that the European Union with 500 million people and with a GDP of 29 trillion is not able to support Ukraine with a much smaller amount. I mean, we are right now supporting Ukraine just by 0.25% of our GDP. Is that enough? No, it's not. We need to move.
It's a very fair question, but some would argue the answer is the European leadership is weak. That's why decisions are not being made. A lot of talk, very little action.
Yeah, and the European nations, European people do not understand the urgency of the situation. It's not just about Ukraine. But today, at the current moment, it is just about Ukraine, because Ukraine is under heavy pressure before the winter time. Russia is putting lots of pressure on the front lines. We need to act right now, very quickly.
When the head of the commission yesterday said this is a very crucial moment and Russia, the playbook has not changed, what does that mean? And does it mean now that we enter full confrontation with them? That can happen on the battlefield. You're a general, you know that.
Russia only understands power.
That means what?
It means that we need to get ourselves much more powerful on the military side. We need to act in support of Ukraine. We need to send finances and weapons to Ukraine. We need to show Russia there's no way that Russia can go further.
Some would argue, however, the war cannot at this point be won on the battlefield. It has to be negotiated. The Americans seem to believe that. What about you?
Well, the Americans believe everything what Putin says.
What do you mean by that?
I'm very surprised that Trump runs like an errand boy for the Putin's capitulation plan, which we have seen, 28-point plan, which was a clear Russian plan how to capitulate, to make Ukraine to capitulate. It has nothing to do with the reality, and it violated all the international rules and regulations we have had till now. So for me, Trump is just weak of taking from Putin everything.
So how do we get to that point then? Because if the Russians have the ear of the U.S. president, it means that the Europeans did not do their job diplomatically then.
Absolutely, not diplomatically, but on the front line also. We have not supported with enough weapons and ammunition Ukraine. A nation, we are the second largest economy in the world. And if somebody tells me we are not able, it's not about we are able, we are not willing, and that is the problem.
Well, thank you so much. And of course, is that the problem that has been the question here in Strasbourg? Of course, as negotiations continue, but you see exasperation at the lack of action, especially when it comes to those frozen assets.
Indeed. Maria Tadeo, Euronews EU editor, thank you so much for that update from Strasbourg. Now, in other news, last night, as Americans were getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving, which is today, of course, a shooting took place just a stone's throw from the White House. As far as we know, 2 National Guards are injured. For more on this story, we're joined now in our studio here by our US politics experts. That's Stefan Kolbe. Good morning, Stefan. So just tell us what exactly happened.
So what happened was that as Washington was winding down its operations because of Thanksgiving, as you said, a gunman opened fire at 2 members of the National Guard at Farragut Square. This is 2 blocks from the White House, maybe a 2-minute walk if you walk slowly. It's an area surrounded by government buildings, by banks, by lobbying firms, by think tanks, by NGO headquarters. And this is where the gunman opened fire at the 2 Guard members. Both were severely injured. It was first announced that they were killed by the governor of West Virginia because both members, a man and a woman, were from the West Virginia National Guard doing duty in Washington, D.C. The gunman was also shot and subdued by law enforcement moments after it happened. We're still at the beginning of the investigation, but this is what happened actually yesterday at an afternoon, busy afternoon in Washington.
But you say gunman, so do we have already details on the perpetrator?
We do have some details. We know that it's a 21-year-old man from Afghanistan who came to the United States in 2021 as part of this big wave of Afghan refugees who left the country when the U.S. military operations were ended and the U.S. troops withdrew from Afghanistan. What was his motive? We don't know. We can only speculate. Authorities said, the mayor of D.C., for instance, said that it was a targeted attack. Now, did he target National Guard members at random? Did he target these 2 people in particular? We don't know yet. As I said, we're at the beginning of the investigation here right now.
OK, we can keep an eye on that story. For more, of course, do take a look at Stefan's story on Euronews.com. And thank you so much for being with us. But for now, with so much turmoil in the world today, there is one man hoping to use his soft power for change. Pope Leo has set off on a 6-day visit to the Middle East. It's his first ever foreign trip since his election. Ida Sanchez has the story.
Your first trip abroad is always an important moment, even more if you're the newly elected Pope. All the cameras are today on Leo XIV, who is leaving the Vatican in Italy on a visit full of symbolism that could set the tone for his pontificate.
I will travel to Turkey and then to Lebanon to visit the beloved peoples of these countries, rich in history and spirituality.
Expected to call for peace in the region, the first US-born Pope will be in Turkey and Lebanon from today until next Tuesday.
And for more on his trip, we can actually cross over now to the Vatican and bring in Euronews' Italy correspondent, Georgia Orlandi. Good morning, Georgia. Lovely to have you with us here on Europe Today. So quite symbolic timing and choice of destination here. Will the Pope have any sway, though, in calming regional tensions?
Good morning, Maeve. Well, this trip is very significant, not only because it's Pope Leo's first trip abroad, but also because it's fulfilling Pope Francis' wish to visit Lebanon. He now managed to do so. 2025 also marks the anniversary of the 1700 Council of Nicaea, which took place in 325 in Turkey, and the meaning of places that Pope Leo will visit and the people that he will meet. That meeting calls for unity of Christians, and this is something that Pope Leo highlighted in an apostolic letter that was published a few days ago. Going back to the geopolitical context, of course, when it comes to Lebanon, let's not forget that this is a country at war, and the context is one of increased tensions, of course. Last Sunday, Israel killed one of Hezbollah's top military commanders in the outskirts of Beirut. Israel's airstrike in southern Lebanon have continued despite a U.S. brokered truce. So, of course, the context is very, very tense, and local authorities do hope that the Pope's visit will bring calm to the region. And although the Pope will not touch on these issues, of course, his message of unity and peace will be perceived as a way to encourage both sides to go back to the negotiating table. Maeve?
OK, Georgia Orlandi, thank you so much for that live update. And of course, despite the efforts of Pope Leo to promote peace, the number of conflicts in the world are on the rise. And that's the reason many EU countries are bringing back military conscription. Jakub Janis reports.
We need to accept losing our children in order to protect who we are. That was a recent chilling warning from French Army Chief of Staff about a potential confrontation with Russia by 2030. For some of us, war still sounds like a distant threat. But when it comes, who will be called to the front line? All over Europe, conscription is back. 10 EU countries already have compulsory service for men, from Cyprus to Finland. Next year, Germany is set to send military questionnaires to 18 years olds. But there is a catch. Their constitution bans drafting women. So while men must answer, for women it remains voluntary. But is war just a man's thing? In the Nordics, it's equal. Denmark and Sweden draft women, and Norway was the first NATO ally to do so. And in Ukraine, over 70,000 women serve, with 20,000 in combat roles. That is almost equal to the entire combined armies of Belgium and the Netherlands. Big armies drain funds from healthcare and innovation. But as Ukraine proves, the price of sovereignty is high. NATO allies could say that they have the luxury of debating this only because Ukrainians are still holding the line. If they had given up, the war wouldn't be on their doorstep. It would be on ours. If this comes, would you be ready to answer the call?
Would you be ready? Do let us know. You can write to us always here on Europe Today at Euronews.com. But that does bring this edition to an end. For more news and analysis, do check out Euronews.com, or you can take a look at our app and download it. Come back tomorrow, though. I'll be here with an exclusive interview with the head of Europol. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care, and thanks for watching.